The following program is a SUTV student production. The views expressed are not necessarily those of Salisbury University, the University System of Maryland, its regents, administration, officers, employees, or representatives.
Thank you, Mr. Lollar, for coming out to Salisbury University to speak with us. We really appreciate it.
I do too, Sarah. It's always good to come back to Salisbury University. In fact, during our announcement week, we actually came down and made it a priority to be here and met the students and some of the faculty here. So I'm honored to be back with you.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
First thing I want to talk about is your candidacy. And so there's a crowded field of candidates for the Maryland gubernatorial Republican primary. What sets you apart from the rest of the candidates in this race?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, it's the leadership experience. To me, leadership is very, very important. And also the lack of political experience. I think that's very, very important at the same time. I think that our state, as well as our nation, but primarily our state, our biggest problem is professional politicians with no leadership experience. Mm-hmm. And the good thing about our Lollar administration, or what we bring to the table, is the exact opposite. We're not in it to make it a career. We believe that the founding fathers never wanted us to make it a career, nor should it be. But we do believe in the importance of leadership, strong leadership experience, and not just leading processes and systems, but also leading people. I've been a business executive for 16 and a half, 17 years. I've been in the Marine Corps as a Marine officer, leading probably some of the most stubborn men and women in the earth, United States Marines for 16 years, both in combat as well as in safe and in peacetime. So I bring that, and the only candidate on either side of the aisle to bring that kind of experience into this race, and I intend to use it to balance the budget. I intend to use it to grow our economy. I intend to use it to get people working again, and do all the necessary things we need to do to make sure that we're passing to the next generation a better state than what we have currently.
Well, you touched on this a little bit, Mr. Lollar, but in the past 44 years, there's only been one Republican governor who served for 4 years. What makes you think that in a primarily blue-leaning state, you as a conservative candidate can win?
To be honest with you, I did not know that we could until 16 months ago, when my wife and I, and a small portion of our team at that time, we started traveling the state, to be honest with you. But the places we went that showed us the opportunity of this candidacy being successful was Prince George's County, Baltimore City, Montgomery County. Those have always been strongholds here in Maryland. I mean, if there is a navy blue about Maryland, it's right there in those 3 counties. And here's what we found. We found that citizens are tired of business as usual. They're tired of partisan politics getting in the way of real solutions and real issues to solve these problems. And quite honestly, they're tired of the tyrannical attitude that currently exists in Annapolis and permeated throughout the state of Maryland. People want better. So I made it my business to go to Democrat meetings, Democratic organizations, unions, and have these types of conversations, not about who's Republican and who's Democrat, but how do we solve our fiscal position here in the state of Maryland? How do we get more people working? I went into Baltimore City and asked those citizens, are you happy with 10.6% unemployment? A resounding absolutely not. How do we bring manufacturing jobs back to Baltimore City that currently has over 12,000 closed businesses? In some places in Baltimore City, 1 out of every 3rd person doesn't have a job. That's 33% unemployment. There's a sense of hopelessness at a time when we're supposed to have all the hope in the world, according to some. We have huge problems in the state. It was through that tour, and even some of the same things that I'm doing now currently in those same 3 areas, Baltimore City, Montgomery County, and Prince George's County, that I finally realized, and we see now, that we can absolutely win this and do it well for all the right reasons. Now, please keep this in mind, just as a caveat to conclude the conversation, at least for this question. I'm not running to be Maryland's Republican governor. Neither am I running to be Maryland's Democratic governor. I'm running to be Maryland's governor, because in my opinion, as an executive of the state, that's the most important thing. I have to be able to be Maryland's governor and present solutions that are best for all Marylanders. And that includes our collegiate students that are looking to graduate from high school and actually get a job and not have to go and get a graduate degree because there's no jobs out there. I need to work hard, and I will, to change the condition that currently exists.
Yeah. So you mentioned Maryland unemployment. So according to the Department of Labor, Maryland's unemployment rate is at 7%, which is just below the 7.3 national average. How do you plan to continue to lower the unemployment rate here in Maryland?
First and foremost, I'm going to bring business back to our state. We've lost 40,000 jobs in the past 5 years. 6,500 small businesses have left this state in that same amount of time, taking with them $5.5 billion in tax revenue. I'm going to tell you why that 7% number is skewed in the wrong direction. Over the past 5 years, really go back even further than that, but at least since 2008, let's start there because it's 2013, we've had a net negative 26% private business jobs leave our state. 26%, net negative. In other words, we've had a 26% drop in private jobs. Over that same amount of time, we've had a 27, 28% increase in public sector jobs. Now, what does that mean? A public sector job, by definition, are jobs that require tax dollars to pay for them. So our government has grown by 27%, but the private industry and small business has decreased by 20%. So that 7% number includes people that are currently working on taxpayer dollars, which is why we have a 25% deficit in our state budget. On $36.9 billion, we depend upon the federal government to give us $9.4 billion just so that we can pay our bills. So when the Department of Labor gives you that 7% statistic, it's based upon the increase of government jobs and the increase of the size of government. And it does not take into consideration the fact that we've lost private business. In fact, we've lost way more private business jobs than we have even created in terms of public sector jobs. That's a real problem. And that has to be explained so people aren't confused by that number, because they think by that number we're doing well. We're doing terrible. It's horrific, the environment. Just go to Western Maryland. Come here on the Eastern Shore. Go to Baltimore City. Go into Prince George's County. Those citizens will tell you something completely different than what that Department of Labor statistic says and what the current governor's saying.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you stated that you believed actions taken by the O'Malley administration have led to businesses leaving Maryland for states with lower taxes and fewer regulations, which we just briefly talked about. But what would you do as governor to attract more businesses to the state? Well,
first and foremost, we have a platform that requires, it's a pro-growth platform. We want to increase the quality of life of everyday Marylanders to include, again, our collegiate students as they begin their exit and their graduations out of college. First and foremost off the bat, we want to reduce the spending that goes on in Annapolis. Now, the only way to do that is to pass a real taxpayer's Bill of Rights. That's going to be important. And all that does is it says that your state government cannot grow any faster than cost of living or the consumer price index. An index is taken quarterly that determines just how fast your economy is growing. So if our economy is not growing any faster than 1%, then our state government can no longer grow faster than 1%. It all be based upon CPI. Secondly, and I think what's even more important for business to come back to our state, is we are going to reduce our tax burden on our citizens and business down to 5% across the board. 5% corporate tax, 5% personal income tax, 5% sales tax. That is in aggregate a 41% reduction in taxes. Currently, we are the 49th worst state to do business in because of taxes, but number two, also regulation. So what's important for us is to ensure when it comes to regulation, we have to go back to transparency and ensure that non-industry citizens or non-industry academia no longer play a role in regulating major industries. In fact, we're going to require that if an industry is going to be regulated by a board or by DBED, it's going to be done through a citizen advisory board that has experience in that particular industry. That's the only way to regulate. Then you won't push so many businesses out. See, farmers don't mind regulation, contrary to popular belief. They don't, as long as it's regulation that makes sense in their industry that really will do something positive. A good example is what had happened to Alan Hudson and his farm right here on the Eastern Shore, where his own tax dollars were used to sue him because of regulation standards that were not even fair. The good thing is, the lawsuit, Alan Hudson won that against Governor O'Malley and the state of Maryland, who went to sue him in the first place. But here's the tragedy. It cost them almost $2 million to do it. The community here on the Eastern Shore threw their arms around Alan and helped to repay his legal fees. And Jim Perdue the owner of that small little chicken farm down here, he turned around and paid the remaining balance on Alan's lawsuit debt. So there's a happy ending to the story, but very tragic in the place that it took the state of Maryland to sue this man. Extensive regulations that they're still trying to impress upon farmers that did not even win in a lawsuit, thank goodness. So if we can show the business community that left us that we're doing something about regulation, that we're doing something about decreasing the tax burden, that we're making steps in the right direction, businesses will come back to our state, employ more people, our tax base will swell and will grow, and more people will have jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've also claimed that the O'Malley administration, our state legislature, have imposed numerous taxes. If you become governor, what would you do differently when it comes to taxation?
Oh, a whole lot. Taxes, first of all, by definition, is your money that the government takes to do its business. So let's make sure we put that out there so all your viewers and all your listeners understand. Taxes is not money that the government is due, or is not money that the government has earned. It is not. Taxes are money they take from you. It's your money. It's your government. You demand better. So one thing I will do is ensure that a minimum amount of taxes is being paid by everyday citizens. And what's even more important is after the budget's been settled and the money's come in, we're gonna spend it as if it's our own. And whatever we don't spend, we're gonna send back to taxpayers because it's their money and they should absolutely demand better. We're going to take a look at all 74 new taxes and regulations that have been passed in this current administration. And I want to say that again, 74 new ways to take more money from you. You'd think that when they went into this almost 8 years ago, their thought process was, how do we increase more and more taxes and take more and more money from everyday Marylanders? And here's the tragedy. Most Marylanders don't even realize that many states, they don't even raise taxes on their citizens, no more than maybe once or twice a year. Do you remember the quote by then President Bush that probably cost him the election, no more new taxes? Because he was trying to take a stand against any tax at all. So for an administration to be bold enough to have passed 74 new taxes on you and I, 74 new ways to take more and more of our money, someone from the age of 5 all the way up to the age of 95 needs to be yelling from the housetops, what in the world are you doing taking more and more of our money? And I don't see services getting any better. And we've bowed to that line that, well, we need them for these services. We need them for these roads. If that were the case, then the funds wouldn't be raided every time they got a chance and stolen from to be used for other things. A Lollar administration is going to govern using common sense. We're going to govern from a business background. We're going to govern as if that money is, which it is, hard-working taxpayer dollars that belong to taxpayers. And if we don't need to spend it, we're not going to spend it.
Mm-hmm. So I know this is on all college students' minds, but students coming out of college are in need of jobs.
Yes.
How do you plan to produce jobs here in Maryland for the unemployed and future job seekers?
Oh, man. We're going to drive toward bringing business back to Maryland. That's our principal focus. We already have certain members of our business roundtable aggressively working on that, asking the hard questions of many CEOs, friends of ours, and even ones we don't know. How do we entice you to bring your business back to our state? Keep in mind, we lost 6,500 of them that used to call Maryland their home. Let's just get them back. And we can get them back as long as we have the right policies that tell the business communities as well as employees, not just the employers, but employees, this is the best place to live and work. So we're going to work aggressively toward that goal to bring these businesses back here to the state of Maryland. In addition to that, I love the idea of building our manufacturing business base back. We've lost 33% of our manufacturing jobs over that same amount of time. We should be leader and best in nanotechnology. We have the human capital and capacity to do so many things in so many areas because we have some of the brightest students, young adults, and older adults in the country. And our proximity to DC makes us a wealth of opportunity for our business base to be attracted here. Did you know, for example, that since 2010, we lost 5 major manufacturers that were looking to come to Maryland, but they went to Virginia instead. Governor Jim Gilmore calls Maryland a gift that keeps on giving. In fact, he thanks Maryland for the entire Fairfax County corridor because it's filled with businesses that were on their way here, but instead they chose Virginia. So we have something to prove. From the day that I get sworn in as your governor here in Maryland, that sign that says Governor Martin O'Malley will come down, it won't be replaced with Governor Charles Lollar. It'll be replaced with a tagline that says Maryland is open for business. Everything about what we do is going to be about employing people and putting them to work, creating business clubs and internships between high school seniors and manufacturing business and jobs, so that when they graduate from high school even, they can go from an internship into a full-time job with a manufacturing company. Doing the same thing with our college students. Now, you all are already wide open for internships, but how about more opportunities in terms of skills for those, skill development and training, specific skills development and training for those students that go to community colleges, so they can spend 2 years in a community college and transition right into a highly skilled nanotechnology manufacturing job. I just left the Business Roundtable today, about 2.5, 3 hours up the road to come to you, Sarah, from Fiberplex, a small little nanotechnology manufacturing company right there in Howard, on the right there in the sector of Howard County and Anne Arundel County. They just hired 2 more people. They are looking forward to expanding, and they want to do just what I'm talking about, build these types of relationships with community colleges as well as with high school students, so that we can bring more and more and more students into manufacturing jobs. Now, a rising tide raises all boats. I'm sure you've heard that before. We can impact the 4-year college student from Salisbury University and ensure they have a job if we're doing the same thing at the community college level, if we're doing the same thing for high school seniors. I guarantee in our administration, our real unemployment numbers will reflect that more people are actually working in the private sector, not just the public sector.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. We're going to talk about crime.
Okay.
So places such as Baltimore City and right here in Wycomico County are among the most dangerous areas in the state. What would you do to reduce crime in these and other high crime areas?
Well, certainly we need partnership between the state and as well as local governments in order to solve this problem. Your sheriffs need to be strengthened. Your police departments need to be strengthened and encouraged. A lot of this can be handled at the local level, but from Annapolis, they need to know they have a partner that's behind them. And we have to take a real look at drug abuse and alcohol abuse. This sense of hopelessness that's crept into our state as a result of lost jobs, not being able to take care of your family. When people run into those types of things, sometimes the backdrop, the excuse out, honestly, is drugs and alcohol. And of course, where there's drugs and alcohol, there's high crime. And it's prevalent. And we're seeing it throughout our communities, especially on the Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, and in Center Maryland. I don't want to sound as if I'm riding a one-trick pony, but business growth and job growth and economic growth does help to cure some of these ills, because it takes the hopelessness away. When I can work and take care of my family and maintain a good job, I can definitely ensure that my family's doing the right thing, I'm doing the right thing, and crime, you'll find, will continue to go down because it creates a more healthy community. But there has to be partnership. And if there's one thing that Sheriff Lewis down here on the Eastern Shore, many other sheriffs, county sheriffs, police departments, one thing they're going to know about a lot of administration is we are open to work in partnership with them through task force and take a stronger look, not just a look, but a stronger step towards solutions, solving problems when it comes to crime. We can't ignore it. It's not going to go away. In addition, we need to keep our sheriffs and our police officers retiring right here in our state. You may not know this, but many of our law enforcement agents and many of our first responders make a choice and decisions to move outside the state when they retire because their pensions get taxed so hard here in the state. Part of my platform calls for pensions specifically for first responders, or that they be without tax-free pensions, specifically when they retire. Because we want to keep more of our law enforcement agents and first responders right here in our wonderful state of Maryland. That will impact crime too, believe it or not. Because when you know that community has 3 retired police officers in it, you'll think twice before doing something stupid in that community. There's an all-encompassing effort that we can do from Annapolis to help lower crime rates. These are just 2, if not 3 of the things I'm going to propose.
All right. And oftentimes when you talk about crime, the gun debate follows. How, if at all, would you attempt to change gun laws in Maryland? And do you think that any of these measures would pass in a heavily Democratic state legislature?
Yes, it will. It will. I'm a Second Amendment Marine. I don't apologize for being a big fan of my Second Amendment. I also don't apologize for ensuring that it's interpreted properly. The move made to say that, hey, we're not saying you can't keep weapons, we're just going to tell you what kind of weapons you can keep, that is just an erroneous. It's a terrible debate. I mean, until you have the criminals turn in their assault rifles, don't ask me to turn in mine. For me, it really is that simple. And it has nothing to do with hunting. Let's make sure that's clear. I want every student, every adult to know that the Second Amendment rights have nothing to do with hunting. When you read the Second Amendment, you'll see that the Second Amendment is all about protection of your property and your rights against tyrannical governments and any enemy or adversary that would wish to impose ill will, take your freedoms, or harm your family. We have to stand up for every Marylander in this state to be able to have the right to bear and keep arms. To me, it is absolutely that important. Some of the things we want to do is take a look at what's been passed. I do know that this particular issue has not gone before a referendum. So I am anxious to get my hands on that piece of legislation, see what's in it, and see the best way for us to make some changes. I think it's important, and I think the people should decide. I think all of Maryland should decide, and I think once all of Maryland gets a chance to decide and votes on it, I think that we will see just where people's loyalties lie or their concerns are when it comes to assault rifles. Also, let me throw this piece out. You want to talk about doing something about crime. I'm a big fan, and this might sound a little radical for you college students, but I think if you made it somewhat of a requirement for everyone to own at least one weapon in their home, it would help with a lot of safety efforts. Now, I'm certainly don't want to dial back the time to Wild Wild West and all that kind of stuff. Now, please don't throw me off the ledge, but I will say this. When a burglar or a would-be criminal walks up on a house and they see that sign in the yard that says protected by whatever security agency and alarm agency, they tend to pass by that house to the next one. And I'm just an avid believer that when a criminal knows that you not only have the right to protect yourself, but you have the means to do so, they'll find somewhere else to do harm. And we have got to allow our citizens to protect themselves against would-be criminals and what they believe their supposed right is to take whatever they want from anyone they want. That's lawlessness at its best, and most law enforcement agents that I've talked to are big fans of the Second Amendment and even bigger fans of the right to bear and keep arms.
Mm-hmm. So here on the Eastern Shore, residents have heard many politicians pledge to clean up the Wicomico River, which is a tributary of the Chesapeake Bay. Mm-hmm. If elected governor, what would you do for unhealthy bodies of water such as the Wicomico River and the Chesapeake Bay, and how high of a priority would environmental issues be for your administration? Environmental
issues will always be a high priority in anything that I do. In this administration or when I'm at home working in my business at Centos Corporation, I'm very concerned about the water my children drink. Of course I am. I'm very concerned about the pollutants that are in the air. I don't like people smoking around my grandson, for crying out loud. Anyone that tells you that they're not a fan of the environment, look out. That's a crazy person. You won't find any person that says that. Most people believe that the environment is important. I believe the environment is important. What I don't agree with is just over-the-top regulations that keep people from doing business, keep people from doing work, especially when there is no direct tie to the regulation that you're pushing and the end state or result that you're looking for. If they're not lining up, scratch it and start all over. Don't push a hard economic agenda, environmental agenda, because you're looking to run for president in 2016 and you want to be as far left as the current president and be known as the green guy. So in 2016, you can be president or vice president. And I think we know who I'm talking about. I don't agree with that stuff. When it comes to the Chesapeake Bay or the Wicomico River and cleaning it up, why not use a common sense approach? Conduct a study, find out what the problem in terms of the pollutants are. And if it's a matter of plastic bags and cans that are in our rivers, then let's partnership with businesses and citizens and community leaders, and let's get out there and clean it up. Let's have a Saturday. I mean, the same way we have, for example, when you drive down the highway, we have adopt a highway signs with businesses underneath that have pledged sponsorships, that they have adopted one portion of that highway, and quite honestly, they go out there and either pay or they make sure it gets cleaned up. We can do the same thing with these rivers and tributaries. Let's adopt a portion of it. Let's get people out there picking stuff up, and using whatever resources we need to keep our waterways clean. It can and will make a difference. I don't want to underestimate the power of the community coming together toward a common goal. We've done things like this in the past. We can do it now. And we can clean up our rivers, our tributaries, and our bay the same way.
So in regards to education, you've said the one-size-fits-all mentality applied does not work here in Maryland.
Yes.
How do you plan to address education here in Maryland without utilizing this policy?
Education in Maryland, one of the more important things for us to focus on, if we want to change education in Maryland, first and foremost has got to be giving parents and their students choice. And their tax dollars should follow where their choice goes. So if my child is going to school A, and that school A is struggling, in fact, they're not giving my child what I believe is the kind of education I expect, then I should have the freedom to take my child from school A to school B, and my tax dollars should follow where I send my child. First and foremost. We do it with charter schools right now. If I decide to send my daughters to charter schools, then that money, school board transfers it right over to the charter school where I send my student. If I decide to send my child to Christian school A, then those tax dollars or tax credit or vouchers should follow my student as well. So first and foremost, I'm a big fan of school choice. Secondly, we need to take a look at how our educators are being educated before they leave graduate school. Before they get that certificate of that teacher certificate, and get with the Board of Regents just to make sure that we are setting our teachers up for 21st century teaching methods, 21st century applications, and I can't tell you how long it's been since we have updated how our educators are educated before they get into the classroom. I think that education is one of those industries that is bound to change, and it's going to change in a big way. As our country and state becomes more and more diverse, we have more and more challenges on how to educate our children, because all children do not learn the same way. This one-size-fits-all just will not work. So I'm looking to take education and honestly look at it the same way our founding fathers did and said, okay, how do we begin a transition to make it work well for students? If you remember, if you historically remember from research, because I'm sure neither one of us was born back then, all students, regardless of grade, went down to the local church and that's what they learned, right there inside the sanctuary. Well, they had to transition that. They started breaking students out by grade, changing where the classroom lies. They had to become more innovative. I think it's still time for that. I think we have to take a look at students that are English as a second language students that are engineer driven, students that are business driven. Parents know what direction their children are going into. Then allow parents and schools to compete for those students. And then those students go the best place and best fit for them so they can succeed. I believe the industry is going to change, just as I have outlined. And I'm hoping that the state of Maryland, at least if I'm able to serve, can help in that transition as we begin to push education further into the 21st century.
So you've stated that the O'Malley administration has been unresponsive to the concerns of everyday citizens. How do you plan to build a relationship with the people, one in which all voices are heard?
The only way to do that is through forums. It's the old-fashioned way. You know, when I grew up down and I spent a lot of time around the country, but every small town that I've had a chance to visit or live in has a town square, and that town square was important. That was a time when all the people kind of came together and brought their ideas in terms of where their tax dollars were being paid. And quite honestly, in those town hall meetings around that square, they'd hold those politicians accountable for what's going on in their state capital. We have to get back to that. I intend to have forums at a minimum once a quarter. Open up the dialogue between the constituency and their governor. They should not see their governor just when he's on TV, as if it's some kind of high-profile position and a stepping stone to the presidency. I reject that notion completely. I want to hear the dialogue. I want it to take that dialogue and form out of that dialogue policies for future steps and issue solutions, and then kind of go from there. And then listen to the constituencies. And then demand the same thing of every delegate and every state senator. One of the first things I intend on doing, and you'll get this first, by the way, so congratulations, Sarah. No one else has heard this but you, because I just add this to my platform not even 48 hours ago, is I intend on sitting down with every delegate and every state senator within the first 90 days of my administration and have a closed-door one-on-one with them. It's never been done before, Republican or Democrat. If to do nothing else but to find out if they're married, they have children, how long they've been in Maryland, what would they like to get out of General Assembly, how I can better serve them. So that we can take for a second the walls of partisan politics down and relate to each other as Charles and Sarah to see what's on Sarah's mind. And then to thank Sarah, whether she voted for me or not, the privilege to be able to serve as her governor. I think things like that will make a difference because at the end of the day, it really is about human capital. It's about people. And we are servants, servants to the people that pay our paychecks. And how we react to that, the type of attitude we give to that, makes all the difference in the world. I had a business roundtable member that owns a business, used to right here in Maryland, right there in Howard County, who said to me, Charles, I went to our governor. He said, no, I went to your governor. And I said to your governor, these taxes are driving our small business out of this state. He said, you know what your governor told me? I said, no, sir, what did he say? He said, he looked at me and said, well, where else are you going to go? So he said, Charles, I showed him where else I was going to go. And my business is now in South Carolina. That's 120 people without jobs. Because of the arrogance of a current governor who forgot who he was working for. Because whether the governor realizes it or not, every penny he has comes from our pockets. None of it comes from his. And for him to look at his boss and say, where are you going to go? Can you imagine if somebody walked into my office at Cintas that was doing a mediocre to terrible job, and they said to me, who else you going to hire? That'd be the last conversation I had with them. We have an administration that has forgotten the importance of people, and they hide behind partisan politics as if it's some type of a shield that's going to keep them from authentic and original reactions that are coming from a very angry citizenry and population. I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. And to wrap things up, just is there anything else you'd like to say to the students of Salisbury University here?
Wow. Yes, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for having me back. Thank you for, and invite me as much as you can to every part of the populace here. I enjoy speaking to all people, all skin colors, all party affiliations. I am interested in bringing Maryland together and not keeping it separated. If I might share this with your viewers and listeners, when I spent 9 months in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, and around the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, talking to high-end military officials, Islamic military officials, my eyes were opened to just how angry and how frustrated the world is with our nation. And for the most part, of no fault to our own. The absolute hatred that exists concerned me for that entire 23-hour flight trip back home. And Sarah, I have to tell you, I sat in my seat and I thought, how ridiculous is it for us to continue to argue about party and skin color and gender when we have an adversary that absolutely hates our way of life? 9 people boarded an airplane with one specific agenda, simply to kill as many of us as possible. And we still found a way to make that a partisan issue. That's a problem. Now, I'm raising 4 daughters. As I told you earlier, I now have a beautiful little grandson. And at the end of the day, everything that I do, and I know it's going to sound commercial, but it is my heart. It's about Jaden, my baby Chelsea, Chastity, Cheney, and Charlie. I want a better state and country for them than what I had. And at a $17 trillion deficit, a $9 billion deficit here in our state, I'm not leaving something better for you, Sarah. I'm making it worse for you. And I just can't have that. I raised my right hand about 16 years ago or so that I would defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. To me, that pledge, it still holds true. The enemy's domestic, and the enemy's not a person, nor is the enemy a party. The enemy is any policy or issue that attempts to take more and more of our freedoms away and keep us separated. And I will personally not let that happen. And I hope that the students here at this university will help me one day serve them as their governor.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.